Hi everyone and welcome to a new Phaseshift devlog. This is devlog number 8. I apologise that I've left it so long. Last month was really hectic, especially with Steam Next Fest. I was also pretty ill for 3 weeks as well last month, so that kind of hampered my productivity. So I'm going to just combine 2 updates this devlog instead of having the one for each, so 0.159 and then 0.1.60. So 0.159 was all about UX and UI improvements. This is the one I've been kind of putting off for a while because I didn't really learn how to do UI correctly, especially when it came to resolution scaling. I just kind of thought, oh well, that looks good, that's great, that's nice on my system, I'm using 920 by 1080, that'll be fine for everybody, right? But it was not. So thankfully someone in the community, Mr. Bai, he was using a 1680 by 1050 resolution. He noticed some real text funkiness, and then I kind of realized that this was not just limited to that menu, it was actually kind of some of the older systems need a bit of a facelift. So yeah, this version was painstaking, going through all of the UI menus, for which there are a lot at the moment, and making sure all the anchor points are correct, and making sure all the text can auto size depending on how big its parent container is. So a lot of that was really needed, but it wasn't the most fun, if I'm honest with you. But it's all done now. The UI can now scale down to a resolution of 720p, which is Switch handheld resolution, which is definitely my target for the future. We also did a lot of UX improvements as well. So a lot of the UI was a bit kind of sluggish, a bit responsiveness wasn't too great for a variety of reasons. So a lot of the focus was making sure it felt really good, felt really quick and snappy. The idea is that Phaseshift I want to be very much like a pick up and play game, so if you're kind of bored or whatever, you can just pick up your Switch or your PC, or well, not pick up your PC, but play a few rounds of Phaseshift. So I want the menus to be quick and snappy and predictable, especially. I think the improvements on the whole have worked out. The UX, the experience is a lot better. I don't think it's where I want it to be. There's a few times where, I mean, especially in this version in 59, there are a few problems with the input system, which I'll get into in the next part. But yeah, there's a few things. I tried to disable mouse input. I'm using the Unity, like the old input stuff, and there's a lot of kind of drawbacks to using that system. The new input system is really good, but again, I'll go on to that in the next section. One such issue is with the mouse, so I'm trying to create a more controller-friendly input. If you click the mouse, it would just deselect your element, and it kind of just messed everything up. You couldn't do anything in the game, so that kind of messed things up. I did create some workarounds which were a bit hacky, but it was clear that these problems were going to be issued later on. This hack was just to basically, on pressing of escape, it would then reselect the last selected button after a mouse click, which again is pretty hacky. It worked, but it kind of would prefer to not happen in the first place. I also freaked out slightly because Steam Next Fest was looming. I messed up my timings completely. I don't know why I messed them up so bad. Of course, because I was being ill, it was difficult to try and get the content out that I wanted at the time. So I did kind of just completely go for it and just try and combine 2 versions together, which wasn't ideal, but it kind of worked out okay. I ended up being a week ahead, which is quite nice, so I had a week to play with. And that's why I've got the next version bundled into this devlog, if you like. But I did improve some other things, so I fixed some of the UI animation issues. I also fixed a lot of audio problems. Yeah, I was having a lot of problems with FMOD at the time. I'm not sure I'd say it's FMOD's fault, it's my fault for not reading the documentation properly. But things with listeners, I just misunderstood the way they worked. So I kind of thought the index was much like a priority index, much like you find on Cinemachine. So this index I was attributing to the lower number being the priority listener, but that's just not how it worked at all. So that kind of, yeah, there's some funky weird bugs that somehow it worked in the previous versions, but this one didn't. So I'm stunned how it works still. Maybe it didn't work, who knows. But it works now, so I've got a switchboard of audio listeners depending on which camera's activated at that time. Lots of work on soundtrack as well, so I've been really blessed to have producer Madrex tracks into these versions. So he's created this version, 1 race track and then 1 menu track. Because the soundtrack is rapidly expanding, I've had to kind of create better functionality around it as well. So this audio manager now kind of persists across all scenes, and then it also logs the artist and the track name that's being played at the moment. The idea is that I will give proper credit to all of these producers whenever that soundtrack's being played, because these guys are doing it for nothing and it's such a charitable thing, and I want to give back as much as I can. So if I can actually promote them while playing the game, then hopefully I'll be doing them a bit of a good service. To get this to work properly was a bit of a challenge. I want obviously all the soundtracks to be completely random within their like soundtrack type, i.e. menu or race, for example. I do want to give, you know, just full random. I also want to do like an MP3 player style graphic in the bottom as well, just to give it that kind of 90s 80s, noughties vibe that I really like in similar games. Other kind of miscellaneous features that I added, I improved the particle effects of the lasers. They now look like actual lasers and not just some bolted on trail renderer. All of the deployables, so things like the drone turret, the defense droid, and the proximity mine, they now have this kind of hard light holographic shader. Thought really improved the look of it. Also made it kind of a bit more kind of realistic. I mean, chucking out a mine out the back of a bike with no exit port's kind of weird, so I just thought, oh, it could just be like light or something, I don't know. It made sense in my head. Also try and improve the visuals of the city track as well, so sort of detail masking, so secondary maps and things to try and give it a bit more flavour. Added some smog and visual improvements to the track, just kind of particle effects, just to make it a bit more kind of lived in, I guess. Another thing I did, this kind of comes with just being a bit more experienced with UV maps and understanding them a bit better. But I did optimise the UV map for the Manta bike. Manta's the bike that's going to be playable during the demo. But yeah, looking back on the UV maps that I actually did previously, kind of embarrassing. They were terrible. To make up for the lack of great mapping anywhere of the mesh, I used 4K textures for something that just did not need 4K textures. So I've put a lot of work into making Manta down to 1K as a texture, and it works, I think, really well. Obviously there is a performance increase with that, obviously, because it's using far less resources, but also because of this newfound understanding of UV maps, I've made some new liveries for Manta, which I'm really chuffed with, and far more customizable options for liveries as well. God, this is a big update. Another thing I did was a complete rehaul of the garage UI. So the livery system has been completely revamped. I'm now using HSV sliders for delivery color, trim color, using a hue slider for the wheel color and the light color, and also you can change things like race number color and font as well. So that's a brief, or as brief as I can make it, overview of the update for 0.1.59. A lot went into it, I've probably missed an awful lot, but now on to 0.160. I need a drink. So following on from the issues I had with the mouse input, deselecting some of the elements on the UI, this was a pretty big problem because it really messed up the user experience entirely. So I vowed to kind of finish and fix that up. So I did just find out about Unity's new input system. I thought it would be a good idea to actually implement it, use it, future-proof Phaseshift, so that if I add anything else in the future, maybe it's easy with this new system. It is a much better system. There's a lot more work that goes into it, a lot more configuration. That does mean that remapping, reconfiguring key bindings is a lot easier. So I thought at this stage, well, I might as well do that as well. A week ahead of my schedule, a week ahead of Steam Next Fest. So I might as well try and pop this in before the Steam Festival starts. I just managed it. It was a bit hairy, but yeah, I managed it in the end. So now this version of Phaseshift now has the new input system. The mouse clicking is no longer a problem. I think the input system as a whole does feel better. I mean, I've had a few people come back saying it feels a lot smoother, which is obviously a plus. But the reconfigurable key maps are a huge bonus. I've had some people using not QWERTY keyboards, just kind of struggling to play the game on keyboard if you don't have a gamepad. So this will hopefully open the game up to them as well. Of course, everybody has their own sort of preferred method of input for racing games anyway. So hopefully this will kind of help reach a larger audience. So this is why I wanted to make this before Steam Next Fest, to try and maximize players, essentially. It also fixed a few bugs that I found here, there and everywhere. Not real big ones, but just things that I kind of found along the way. I've changed the difficulty as well. It's still using the very easy, normal, hard, very hard method, but the scaling has changed. So the old normal is now the new hard. The new normal, the AI is slightly slower, just very slightly slower than you, so it's easy to catch up. I wanted to kind of make the experience a bit more fun for people. I do enjoy personally quite challenging games. I appreciate that's not kind of normal, I guess. So for the normal modes, I've also added in a damage modifier as well, so the AI do less damage. So hard mode is like 1-1, so hard is basically the same scaling you have as the player, whereas normal mode you have reduced damage to you, and they're just ever so slightly slower as well. So the idea was across Steam Next Fest was to have the AI just a little bit more forgiving. The game would be hopefully a lot more fun to play. So that was a relatively small version. I just wanted to get the input system out there and properly tested for the festival. Obviously, kind of, if you can't play the game and that doesn't really work, then not going to go down very well. I also did a secondary update for this 2 days into the festival. I kind of read a few articles that stated that the bigger your demo, the better it'll go, which makes sense, to be honest. I think I made the demo a bit too short, so I added a secondary map. This was a bit of a favourite from the first demo, so I've added both the city track and the ice track into the Steam Next Fest demo, which I think was a real positive move. I think that kind of increased the game time, and also the people streaming the game also had more options to play Phaseshift, and that kind of gave it more airtime, so that I think was a good move. It also fixed some issues that people found with the demo. Things like had the mouse locked from the previous input system had the mouse locked to the center. People using sort of more accessibility options or third-party solutions couldn't really use the mouse for input, which was a bit of an issue. I also improved the pause menu, especially the controls menu, just to make sure that people can see what the controls were and were actually able to actually exit the controls menu as well. They also found some oversights with the new audio manager. I thought I had implemented a really good fade in, fade out system, but the fade ins or fade outs didn't work when you finished a race. It worked when you actually pause the menu and then return to the menu through the pause menu. So I added this fade in and fade out system to the rest of every game mode, and I've also added some sort of visual fade in and fade out as well, just to make it a bit more professional and polished, I guess. So I think that's it for this version's. Going forward, this next version is going to be all about all the feedback I've received from Steam Next Fest. I'm overwhelmed by the support and the love for it. I was really quite surprised by how many people were really kind of connecting with it, enjoying it, kind of understanding the game, if that makes any sense. The feedback from the festival has been fantastic. Really, really helpful stuff. I'm quite excited to actually get these features inside the game as well. So some of these things are like damage perception. I think a lot of people thought that when you got hit by something, it could be a bit more dramatic. The explosions and things, especially when the bike has been destroyed, could be a little bit more, again, dramatic, a bit more bigger. I've got some ideas for things like a sort of camera shake, some sort of filtered effect when getting hit by something, as well as increased vignettes when you're actually hit by something with great damage. Still feel the UI is a little bit clunky in places. I think I try to be a bit clever with some of the features, but of course, because it's not expected, I think some users were like, why is it doing this? So I'm going to kind of go to a more traditional UI setup, I think, especially when it comes to the settings menus. Had an awesome chat with the Discord community about physics, especially at high speed. So hopefully I'm going to be incorporating and making downforce and aero a bit more of an important player in how a bike actually handles. So I've already got a slipstream mechanic, but new proposed way will hopefully make it a bit more of a mainstay of the actual core game mechanic. I always want to kind of give the people behind a bit more of an advantage, especially when it comes to things like slipstream and gaining up and catching up with the pack. So yeah, I'm excited to see if this will make a change or a positive change for the physics. It sounds like on paper it would be a really fun addition to the game. Another great suggestion was by Twitch streamer Serial SC, which was, of course, when you first start, there's like 4 abilities. There's drifting, there's boosting, there's all sorts of things. It's not very typical for a racing game. He made the suggestion of having the control maps actually underneath the ability icons, so you know which button to press, which again I think is a fantastic idea. There's another suggestion to make it a bit more obvious when the abilities could actually be triggered. So I've got an idea to make them kind of like flicker or kind of like grow just momentarily, just to let you know that they're available to use. Another cracking suggestion from the Steam community board from I think it's Silk. They said that they thought it would be better if the bike was a bit more obviously damaged when it had taken damage, which obviously makes a lot of sense. At the moment, the bike doesn't show any kind of... The only thing that does happen is when the shields go down, there's like a little electric burst. But when the armor's low, it should be smoking, things should be hanging off. The smoking thing I can definitely do. The hanging off might be a little bit out of scope, but I definitely think that's a worthy addition, as well as all the alarms going off and the UI flickering at you. So essentially, across the board, just greater player feedback in combat is the name of the game for this one. So I'm really excited to actually get started on this one, because I really do think this will really improve Phaseshift. So the feedback has been fantastic. So hopefully the next devlog won't take as long as this one did. It hopefully won't be as long in length as this one is, and also feature more exciting new features as opposed to just UI, resolution, anchoring, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next devlog. Take it easy.